We talk about this all the time. Everybody wake up. You have to understand, you do not want a low cholesterol.
Real food. We're not taking prebiotics out of a bottle. I've kind of seen this slow down a little bit. I know they're still out there, but we can't just eat a crummy diet and then say, I'm going to get my prebiotics, my digestive enzymes from a pill. Hey guys, welcome back to another Rest, Eat, Move podcast. It's Matt and Chris in the brand new studio. It's been a long time coming. We got a couple things to keep tweaking on, but pretty excited to have this new space, new podcast set up. And then I got you to come down from up north to record
It's my first time in the new space. I love it. It's really nice.
So today we're going to talk about hormones, why we need to know about them. I think sometimes we glaze an eye, or, when I was coming up through school and even, 20s, I think hormones are for menopausal women. You don't learn much about them. You don't learn the importance of them. You don't learn how much we can control them. You don't learn why the endocrine system's been so disrupted with the plastics and the creams and the skin products. So today we're going to talk about hormones. We're going to get right to the chase of it. Hormones are chemical messengers. So let's start right there. What's your take on hormones? When did you start learning about hormones? And why should we do this podcast today to teach the listeners on hormones?
Well, the reason we're doing the podcast because it's in every social media outlet what you talk to. So everybody's talking about it. And the question I get from training and when we're speaking is, what about this? What about testosterone replacement therapy, hormone replacement therapy, or whatever? So again, we just are confused. We don't really understand what they do, and they run the ship.
Do you think people hear about testosterone, but do they really even think deep about that even as a hormone? They just heard of testosterone and...
Yeah, back in the day, when we were bodybuilding, everybody was taking steroids, that wanted to compete at a higher level. And so...
then you didn't even think that was testosterone, really. You just heard steroids.
Yeah, steroids. It makes your muscles bigger.
And now it's called TRT, or testosterone replacement therapy, but which is a steroid.
Steroid, yeah. So again, they're called steroidal hormones.
Sex hormones.
Sex hormones, building hormones. That's what they're called. Really, the real technical term is steroidal hormones. So again, we got to go back to what do they do. That covers all of them. So that's the builders, that's anabolic. That's why they used to call them anabolic steroids, because they're growth. So if you want to compete at a high level, people are taking anabolic steroids for both men and women.
So podcast 268, we just went through the source, the cell, the pH, the three principles. I thought it was a perfect time to kind of lead to this, because maybe you're going down this path where hormones are starting to be an interest, or you're like, I need to lose weight. My metabolism's a little bit gummed up, or I want to gain muscle or look lean or whatever it is. And sometimes people go after that hormonal thing without understanding those three principles. So I think it's a good point. Because
I thought you did a great job on those principles. If you haven't listened to them, go back and listen to the cell, the pH, and the source, because you're right. It builds that foundation footprint.
Everything we're going to talk about today, we got to get the cells healthy. We got to get the pH in balance, and we have to say, okay, how are we going to do it? We're going to go to the source. Everything happening right now is, what are you going to supplement with, or how are you going to block these hormones? I see ads for like hair loss, and so they're going to try to block, I think it's DRT, or one of the hormones that has your hair falling out, or how am I going to supplement to increase these things? You got TRT, you got menopause symptoms, you got the low T, the estrogen, the cancers with prostate and breast, and then you got that bioidentical hormonal supplementation that's chemically identical, yet it's not the hormone. It's made in a lab. So that's what's happening right now.
So again, we don't have that self-awareness, number one, and we don't have the education, number two. And so now we're seeing some crazy marketing that, maybe I need to, androgel, and the list goes on and on.
Well, yeah, I think right now as we think exogenously, so outside of our body, we can just chemically change these things up. And you got peptides and these different therapies, and they're going to try to replicate the chemistry that's happening in the body and the orchestra. So you're going to try to really hack this thing. And as everyone listening kind of knows, we believe that's not going to be the long-term play for most people. So do you want to go through kind of different hormones and what they do, and then how we can control that? You want to take that route?
Yeah. So again, you said at the very beginning, it's a chemical messenger. So they communicate to the body. So the body has all these different hormones that do different things to communicate to the body, but they work together as an orchestra. That's the key. And so what we're finding today is that we're missing some pieces in the orchestra. So now we're going to try to fill it in externally.
So for example, if you haven't ate, or maybe you ate the wrong foods if you want to go deeper, but let's just say you haven't ate, we have this chemical messenger that signals it's time to eat.
Thank goodness, right?
Right. So that's what we're going to do. So insulin is a hormone.
It's one of the most powerful hormones in the body.
And think of that as a growth hormone.
Mm-hmm. It's an anabolic.
Yep. Glucagon, which is a storing hormone.
Yep, that's catabolic.
Thyroid, T3, T4.
Sorry. I was thinking about ghrelin, but glucagon, you're right, is a storing.
Thyroid, T3, T4, which is metabolism. We'll talk about that in stress. Cortisol, which is a stress hormone. Thank goodness we have that, right? When you're under stress response, you get prepared.
Fear.
Adrenaline, epinephrine. This is your fight or flight. We've all, had that feeling. Sometimes it feels pretty exciting. Growth hormones. This is going to improve the cell or repair the cell. Fat burning, muscle gaining. We've heard a lot that because when steroids kind of became taboo, then it went to these athletes are taking growth hormone, and it's just going to keep shifting. It's like the ball in the cup.
Yeah, it's a little shell game.
And then you got the sex hormones, or the steroidal hormones, which is estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, oxytocin. So this is going to be that love bonding hormone. And there's many, many more. You got hormones that are neurotransmitters. So you got the serotonin, dopamine. These are going to be not only hormones, but they're also neurotransmitters because they can cross the blood-brain barrier. That's kind of an interesting piece. Most hormones are made in the organs or the glands. So that's kind of a little bit about what's going on. And then you love to talk about ghrelin and leptin. So talk about ghrelin and leptin.
So if you are more satisfied, that's called leptin.
So that means you're full. It's going to signal, I'm full.
Yep, I'm full. We've all done that before. And then ghrelin will signal that you're hungry. And many times when people don't get enough sleep, they overproduce ghrelin. So now, again, it's that balance. Like, I'm always thinking about food. Well, something's maybe a little bit.
So when I was in college, I did a paper on high fructose corn syrup. And at the time, the thing was high fructose corn syrup. It's the same as sugar. It's not bad, blah, 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 blah. I think by now everyone kind of tries to avoid. Yeah. Every food company knows that they want to run unless everyone is buying it just for strictly the taste. But one of the things, high fructose corn syrup, one of the things chemically that was happening, it was block the production of leptin. And so you would consume a ton of it because you wouldn't feel full.
Yeah, you're constantly eating.
So that's an interesting piece. And so there's a lot of chemical messengers happening, and sometimes we have this disruption. So the chemicals are there, but something's blocking it. The signal isn't as strong, and that's what we're seeing a lot of with this endocrine disruptors. How does that happen? Why is this more common than ever?
Think about, like, for example, type 2 diabetes. So the cell, back to your 3 principles, the cell is too stiff and rigid. So when you eat food, it's very difficult for insulin. Here comes insulin. Insulin basically is a hunger hormone, and it stores. So if it doesn't store what it's needed, it produces more and more and more and more because it's trying to allow that glucose to get into the cell.
So it's the key to the cell.
It's key to the cell. So you got to understand that if my cells aren't healthy, you're going to overproduce insulin. You're probably going to eventually be type 2 diabetic.
Glucose is going to elevate.
Glucose goes up. I'm not satisfied. So glucose goes up, glucose goes down. So now my energy system is a mess on top of my hunger and goes on and on. So these hormones are really powerful things.
Yeah, I mean, and then ghrelin, you said, sleep. So if you're not getting enough sleep, ghrelin doesn't.
You're not as satisfied.
You're not as satisfied. So ghrelin actually is more active.
Yeah. So when you study obesity, many times the people are more obese, they don't sleep well. Hence, they produce more ghrelin.
And you're hungrier.
Hence, they're hungry all the time, and that's all they're on the mind. And you hear this all the time now with Ozempic and some of these. They're not thinking about food anymore. Well, it's because it's blocking. Now we're blocking things.
And when we go right to the brain, but right. A lot of these hormones are made, with communication to the brain. So you're now you're dysregulating a natural orchestra.
So now something's going to be out of balance down the road.
Somewhere downstream.
Downstream, correct.
So ghrelin, leptin, insulin.
Those three are really interconnected. And if you don't understand that, then many times people are always hungry.
So when people say, well, it's insulin resistance, or it's a sugar thing or a carbohydrate disease, A lot of people think, well, my insulin's high, I need to eliminate carbohydrates. That's why it's important to listen to the 3 principles. It's a cell thing.
Yeah, it's not a disease of carbohydrates. It's a disease of the cell. It's not eating more bananas. It's the cell doesn't understand how to open up and be fed. And so insulin's really, it's like the rusty lock. So insulin comes in and tries to open it up. It's too rusty. So hence my glucose
and as
keeps
we
climbing.
got this building prepared, there's a lot of doors in this building, and some of the doors haven't been used in a while. I got the key. Mm-hmm. The lock's a little rusty,
right.
Not working very good. And so now I either can say I got to replace the lock, clean the lock, and that's the idea here. It's not about adding more keys.
So again, as a society, we have to wake up. Why are we having a severe epidemic of type 2 diabetes? It's because the cell's not healthy. Insulin tries to open up the cell, has a hard time doing that, and the list goes on and on. So now we're having problems.
Or, think about all the issues. We're going to talk about the gut in a little bit and the neurotransmitters, and you got serotonin, and people aren't as happy, and the SSRIs, and irritable bowel syndrome, and Crohn's disease, and autoimmune issues. And you
how much time do we have today?
and you think back, and we'll get into cholesterol today, inflammation. These all lead to down this hormonal communication. So many times you're overproducing the signaling, or there's a disruption and a blocking of some signaling. In the past, we've worked with some clients who have had some thyroid issues, young age, looked healthy, and then all of a sudden like that. And you start to realize, well, iodine's needed by the thyroid, but our food system's bombarded with bromelain and some of these other iodine blockers. Your body can only absorb, or your thyroid can only use so much, and bromelain looks like iodine to the thyroid, but it's not. And so then what ends up happening is you're not getting enough iodine, your metabolism starts to shut down because you're overconsuming.
So when you consume foods that are processed, many processed grains, you're going to have these blocking agents, or you're going to have endocrine disruptors like deodorant or aluminum or parabens, and so now you're not even looking at that.
Plastics,
and you look at your toiletries, or you're looking at your cleaning products, and next thing you know, if you really get into the weeds with these things, and that's why I did a whole chapter in my book on it, because people don't even think about that. Like cancer, people don't even think about that. It's not even on the radar screen. If those are disrupting your hormones, you're going to have a problem. And so now we start slowly looking at kind of the whole big picture.
Now let's pause there. We all have disruptors happening. That's what you have detoxification happening. That's why you have the immune system. That's why you have your
the body's trying to clean
lymphatic system.
Yep.
So we all have toxins, disruptors.
Everybody does.
The problem is, as you compound it, you gum up the system. We'll talk about your kidneys and your liver and all that detoxification. This is where it starts to show up in symptoms.
Yeah, and all you really try to do is slowly eliminate a couple things. You change your toothpaste, you change your deodorant, you look at maybe some makeup or whatever you're using on your skin.
Drink more water.
And then that helps to clean the body. But it's the piling on. That's the problem. And that's one of them, is these endocrine disruptors that we put on our skin.
Yeah, and again, as we were talking here, I find these hormones so fascinating. It's like, how does everything work? Well, this answers a pretty big part of it.
Yeah.
I was doing a little research as we were getting going here, and we talk a lot about cholesterol. Statin medications, in our opinion, are probably one of the worst prescription medications that many people are misprescribed. Now, we're not your doctor, not your physician. A little disclaimer: what we believe, unless you've had a heart attack, I think there's another route for statin medications. Well, when you pull back the curtain, your cholesterol is the backbone to many hormones, specifically your steroidal hormonal pathway, your sex hormones,
and your stress hormones,
and your stress hormones. Mm-hmm. So that whole pathway, and you can just chat GPT it, Google it, and this will come up that low LDL equals a disaster hormonally. Yet every person, if I had you and I was interviewing you, your doctor, your cardiologist, the news says that, well, I need to keep my LDL low.
Under 70 now.
What ends up happening is we may have an elevated LDL or cholesterol or family history, and then we try to mitigate it. We try to manage the risk. And then once we manage that risk, we start to pull it down. No one's worried about it being too low. Let's just work backwards. Cholesterol is the backbone to many of your hormones, specifically your sex hormones.
Yeah, so if you're building a house and you don't have cholesterol, there's nothing to build the foundation out of.
Or if you already built the house, that foundation's starting to crack.
Oh, it's
the mortar's getting pulled out, sucked out.
So we talk about this all the time. Everybody wake up. You have to understand, you do not want a low cholesterol. You do not, because cholesterol is amazing in how it builds the body.
Well, again, I've seen lately, as I've gotten some blood work from different females who hormonally, symptomatically, whether it's weight, digestion, sleep, hot flashes, whatever the case is, they have enough pain where they're trying to self-correct. Well, most of those people, unless they already had elevated level, would never know that they're too low level. So when you get your blood checked, if your level is under a certain range, it's going to be green.
Pat you on the back.
So Many people have no awareness of when cholesterol is too low. And I've said this for the last 5 years of my presentation. Right. At some point, we're going to wake up and say we have an epidemic of too low level of cholesterol.
Well,
cancer,
yes,
disease.
Cholesterol makes life. Every cell in the human body, you talked about in your cell, every cell is made of cholesterol. As you come into the world, cholesterol levels super high, especially for pregnant women. And as we go out, cholesterol is extremely low. So cholesterol makes life. Just remember that one today.
So when people are saying, "Well, I have family history and I want to keep my LDL," just know you're gonna have other side effects. Number one, with the statins, that's why we don't recommend them. Number two, there's many times where we actually need to make the body work with the body.
With it.
Yeah,
yes.
So we might want to actually raise cholesterol imbalance,
yes,
so that we can be thriving. We see this with our men. So they're on a statin medication. Next, they're going to go on a testosterone.
Yeah, so now they're taking TRT because they have low.
Or with women, high stress, thyroid starts to dysfunction,
right.
T3, T4, and then their cholesterol is actually too low, high inflammation. Next thing you know, we're not able to have those sex hormones.
So we want our cholesterol level high and balanced.
I just thought that was interesting. You can Google ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Low LDL equals disaster for hormones. That tells you that your cholesterol is amazing.
Yes.
It's not that it's bad. It's about we want to keep it in balance.
Correct. So that's what it makes your sex and building hormones.
Okay, so we talked about cholesterol. Let's talk about selenium and zinc. You love to talk about selenium and zinc, which leads to a couple of the actions that you do daily.
Again, if I sit down with somebody, men and women both, and I generally will ask them about their testosterone, and I get that checked because generally if testosterone's in a good place, cortisol's in a good place because they're kind of opposing.
Well, you say testosterone's a longevity marker.
It's a longevity marker. It shows you how you're aging. So I like to get that for both men and women. And so when I get that number back, the first thing I always ask the question is why do we have such imbalance of hormones, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone? What's causing the problem? And the first cause, in my opinion, is stress. So the first thing we look at is, are you getting enough rest? What's your sleep look like? But we got to ask the question, why is everybody so clamoring to get on TRT for men and hormone replacement for women? What is it? I think the big one is stress. We don't get enough sleep. Pace of our life is too much. We don't get enough rest and rejuvenation. We don't plan it. Our schedules are crazy.
We're running
from the bear. So the first thing is when I talk to everybody, we have to understand that because if stress is on, your sex hormones will be compromised. They're every off. Time. And that steals. It's called cholesterol steal or cortisol steal.
Yep.
So when cortisol steals from that, you could take all the hormones you want. You're never going to be optimal, right? So then you say, okay, well, what about food? What food can make my hormones ideal? And the big one for both men and women is your omega-3 and omega-6 fat. So that's your flax seeds, that's the cod liver oil, that's could be pumpkin seeds and Brazil nuts. But the sidebar of pumpkin seeds and Brazil nuts, they're also high in selenium and zinc.
So hold on. So obviously you do this every day and you kind of piece these things together, but let's extract that. So your healthy fats, omega-3s, omega-6s, these are your hormone.
And healthy blocks. Saturated fats like coconut and monounsaturated fats like macadamia nuts.
So I wrote down here oil. Omega-3s.
Omega-3s. That's the first step I do with both men and women. Get your omega-3s.
The cod liver oil, the flaxseed.
Yep, I get them to do that. Boom, here we go.
The avocados.
Yep, 1 to 2 tablespoons of the cod liver oil. We believe we have the best in the world. 1 to 2 tablespoons of ground flax. You could put in pomegranate juice or dark cherry juice a little bit. Do that 3 or 4 times a week, or you put in a smoothie. I get that covered. Let's make this simple. The second piece is we move over to omega-6 fats. Nobody even talks about this. They talk about quit
Seed oils.
doing seed oils. Okay, I get that. We're not doing corn oil. We're not doing, cottonseed oil. We're not doing the seed oils. I get it. That's processed garbage. What we have to focus on is the source omega-3 or omega-6s. Again, back to pumpkin seeds, Brazil nuts, hemp seeds. These are all high in omega-6 fats, but they're also high in selenium and zinc, which is the raw material to make testosterone.
Selenium and zinc are the raw material to make testosterone.
It's not that hard to do. So today I had my oatmeal. I put some pumpkin seeds on my oatmeal. Or you just got these amazing mangoes in. I have a couple mangoes and some Brazil nuts.
Those won't make it up north.
Yeah, I got 2 packages.
Okay, you'll make it.
So that's how you begin, because these healthy fats are the raw material for a lot of hormones in the body.
So I say, in my presentation, it's one of my jokes, and if you've heard it, maybe it's funny. I think it's funny. I'm usually speaking in the morning, and I say that zinc is the backbone to your sex hormones. And how many of you want to have good sex hormones? And everyone's kind of looking at me like, what's the point? Well, we don't get zinc from a multivitamin.
Is that coming from the multivitamin?
You can get it from food. And so one of the things that acid reflux medications leach out is zinc. So people are taking acid reflux.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, this is a disruptor.
Right.
And you think, well, no problem, and take care of the symptoms. So we have all these disruptors, pharmaceuticals,
and
over the
here
counters.
comes magnesium's going out the door, and calcium's going out the door.
But zinc is good for your immune system. It's amazing for your testosterone. Again, how do you get zinc?
I mean, if you really look at what builds your sex hormones, it really gets back to understanding rest. Get rest.
Sure.
And then from there, you go to your healthy fats. And then you move into strength training.
All right, we'll summarize that in a second.
Yeah.
So you love 1 or 2 Brazil nuts a day. 1 or 2, not 3, not 5. I mean, 1 or 2. Maybe you have 3, but
if I don't count them out, I eat the box. But
that's all you need for an amazing amount of selenium and zinc. Pumpkin seeds,
tablespoon of pumpkin seeds on my oatmeal. A couple of Brazil nuts here and there. I like them in a smoothie because I like the crunchiness of them. It's not hard to do to get your selenium and zinc and your omega-6 healthy fats.
So from a recap, so we're going to go down the rest piece and the exercise, but from a food standpoint, number 1, when we're talking about hormones, your daughter, your coworker, your wife, your spouse, your husband, whoever you're talking with, and they're like, well, my hormones, or I don't feel like I have the right mood or energy. Number 1, we got to get fats.
Got to get the fats.
Omega-3s, healthy saturated fats like coconut oil, healthy monounsaturated fats like avocado, extra virgin olive oil, eating the egg yolk of a...
Just draw a little piece of paper with these fats on them and just go, okay, I pick off the menu a little bit each week.
And then the flaxseed, chia seed, pumpkin seeds, Brazil nuts. Super simple. And that is going to be your building block.
It is also great for brain health and inflammation and gut health and on and on, but we're really specific for hormones.
Okay, so let me go down the path a little bit more nutritionally. So number 2, I put cruciferous vegetables. Everyone's kind of heard, broccoli and kale and cauliflower. These are going to be very detoxifying.
Cleansing, yes.
Cleansing. But I'm going to make it really simple. Let's just make that category greens.
Any greens.
Any green's going to have chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is very detoxifying. What we now know is, again, if we don't flush the body of these toxins, of too much buildup,
the sludge builds up.
Sludge builds up. Number 3, gut health, which
one thing too about use your arms. Get your lymphatic system.
We'll talk about movement. Yeah, we'll talk about movement.
But that back to your cleansing lymphatic.
Number 3, gut health. So symbiotics. Think about, this is where we want to eat berries and apples and fruits. When we think hormonally, a lot of people think, well, I'm trying to keep my insulin low, and I'm not going to eat any fruit, and fructose is in fruit. Here's what we need to know. Fruits are cleansing. They're amazing for your gut health. They're amazing for inflammation.
Yes.
Berries, nuts. You got oatmeal, which is a symbiotic. Apples are symbiotic. Real food. We're not taking prebiotics out of a bottle. I've kind of seen this slow down a little bit. I know they're still out there, but we can't just eat a crummy diet and then say, I'm going to get my prebiotics, my digestive enzymes from a pill.
Yeah, here's my gummy.
Let's eat real food.
I think you're right too. I think I see less of that trend.
But we don't see less of the symptom.
No.
So it's just going to be something different.
They're going to do something else.
And that's what, colostrum and some of these things are touting as the digestive issue. Protein, we talk about protein many times. We try to educate people on not consuming the processed whey proteins. But again, as I was doing some research, there's a ton of information on how spirulina chlorella, which is a plant-based protein, it's the highest by weight protein, plant or animal. This is one of the best things for your hormonal repair. So your protein is going to be your hormonal production and your repair. And so then also making sure that we're having these lean, local, organic animal products if you're, consuming animal products. And then number 5, you kind of talked about it already, is trying to eat foods high in zinc, high in magnesium, high in selenium, high in iodine. These are some of those minerals, these trace minerals that we get very...
I think the other thing too, why we're talking about this right now is if you're having problems or you feel like because like you said, you might have a 30-year-old, you're not even paying attention to it. But as a 30-year-old, I really want people to start having some type of measurement that they can track the rest of their life. So if you haven't had your testosterone level checked, both men and women, when you're 30, next time you go and get that. So now you have a baseline. You don't have to have it every year, but now you have a baseline to recognize because, I played pickleball last night with a bunch of my close friends forever. We're all in their late 60s, early 70s, and, hormones are changing, but they don't have to change as rapidly as everybody thinks they do. And I think that's the problem. But you want to have a measuring from the beginning all the way, and then you can say, hey, is something working or not working? What do I need to work on versus I'm just going to jump right to,
you
hormone
used
replacement.
To have this analogy about the phone cord. If you're always yanking on the phone cord, it's hitting the counter every time you answer the phone. The signals get fried.
Right.
You were specifically talking about the myelin sheath, but it's the same thing with your hormones. They're a signal. And so your cells and your synapses and your nerves, as you age, that's what's happening. They're aging. And so the key is, can we keep them in the insulated cord?
They see it in a good spot as best we can. We're all aging.
Yeah.
They're all going to see a decline slowly, but that's the key. It's the slow decline versus I need to jump in and do this. Because you're going to have, again, you're going to upset the orchestra somewhere. And that's what people aren't really talking about today is that, I told you this before we came on. I had a really amazing woman I trained back in the day. Her name was Dr. Janet Osach, and she was a breast cancer surgeon. And she came to see me because she had a brain tumor. So she came out of rehab. And first thing we worked on is the whole nutrition piece because that wasn't even on her radar screen. She was a busy surgeon. But one of the things as we got going, we did some events together. But she talked a lot about hormone replacement therapy was overprescribed, back in the day. And many of her breast cancer patients were directly related to the hormone replacement. It's no different today. We're taking TRT like we don't even know. We don't know what it's going to do long term.
Birth control, TRT.
And so just be cautious that the human body can do lots of good things, and we've seen it in our practice without having to go down that path.
And then there's these chemicals, and that's why these endocrine disruptors that mimic hormones. So there's many of these, plastics, one of them, that mimic hormones in the body, and so it creates this overabundance. But no, that's an interesting perspective. And she's a surgeon, and she's having to kind of think back.
And she said to me, way back in the day, she said, I never ever connected the dots. So that's when you start connecting the dots. Again, they were overprescribing hormone replacement, and now it's the same path we're seeing with testosterone replacement.
Different name. And
correct. Again, just be careful that we need to...
I think everyone's trying to help with the symptoms. So TRT, if you're low mood, bad mood, low libido, belly fat, no energy, lost...
And we're not saying that you can't go down that path. If you do go down that path, you want to make sure you get a medical supervision. But for most people, like the cholesterol medication, that's not where you begin.
But just understand, it's like a teeter-totter. And if that teeter-totter gets tipped over, you're going to play this game.
Yeah,
where you're
let's not jump to that. Let's jump to what we can do and let the body try to heal itself.
So nutritionally, we talked about a lot of things. Let me hit 2 things, and then we'll move to rest, and we'll move to exercise, and we'll wrap this up. Vitamin D, so much information's coming out about vitamin D and how it's actually a hormone in the body. It's a hormone-like substance in the body. It's a vitamin. It's all of these components, and amazing for your immune system, amazing for thriving. We talk about one of the benefits of our cod liver oil is it's the highest source of vitamin D of any food naturally. And me and you are not a big fan of taking vitamin D, IUs of synthetic vitamin D.
Hard to absorb.
But it's a sunshine-powered hormone.
Mm-hmm.
And what's your take on vitamin D, and when did you start seeing it in your practice where When do we become so deficient in vitamin D?
Well, growing up, everybody was drinking milk because you got to have vitamin D. And so I was thinking, well, I overconsumed milk and I had all sorts of digestive health issues, whatever. But that's how you got your vitamin D. If you didn't drink milk, you didn't have
calcium and vitamin D.
Yeah, you didn't have your healthy bones. So, but as time went on, I started looking at I was very interested in omega-3 fats. So you got fish and salmon, and the list goes on. But then I started realizing that cod liver oil, if you have really truly healthy cod liver oil, it's the highest source of vitamin D3 of any food. As we talk about that, most
naturally occurring
right from the source. So our livers are frozen on the boat. It's high in D3 naturally. So most people are deficient in vitamin D, especially when they live in northern climate. So many people in Michigan or Midwest or North, they're very deficient in vitamin D. And then I used to have clients, the doctor would give them 50,000 IUs in a week, and now they're having other issues because they're having too much and they weren't really having great absorption. So that's really, when you think about vitamin D, we need it, and we need to get out in the sun, number one, and number two, we need to make sure we're consuming foods high in vitamin D3, and really that's where the cod liver oil comes in.
Yeah, we now know that if you have appropriate levels of vitamin D, it's one of the best things you can do for your immune system. And so
that's
a lot
what
of
it
people
is.
are running to the store and saying, well, I need to take synthetic vitamin D. No, we need to get sunlight, and then there's some different ways to not only retain it, but get it through.
And I thought you did a nice job in the Source podcast. Again, back to the source. It is in the cod liver oil. It's not added. It's in it. That's why we're not promoting synthetic vitamin D.
So nutritionally, that's kind of the thing. And then the last thing is intermittent fasting. And I talk to many people about fasting, and we call it intermittent fasting. But we've been fasting for millions of years. All humans have always fast. You sleep. And so we talk about circadian rhythm fasting because it's a much more sustainable way to fast, and it gives you that 12 to 14 hour gap to detoxify. One of the things that I'd like to explain about the intermittent fasting, you don't do it right, or let's just think about the sumo wrestlers, or you think about people that are irregular with their food, you start to disrupt your hormones because you're confusing it. So one day you might go 16 hours, the next day you might go 8, some weeks you don't do it at all. Maybe you drink on the weekends, and so next thing you know, the body doesn't know what's coming at it. And so if you're fasting, for example, the body's going to start to put in, storage because it doesn't know when it's getting full.
Well, I like what you said. It's a circadian rhythm fast. It's no different than sleep. You're not going to change it you're going to try to create a system so the body can recognize that when melatonin comes out to play.
Which allows your chemical messengers to be better.
Yes.
They know what's expected.
Consistency, right. And number two, if you don't know exactly what you're doing, you start messing with those. And that was the first book I wrote called Meal Patterning, based on sumo wrestlers. They only eat one meal a day. They're fasting 23 hours a day.
That's not working for them. Oh, it's working for them how they want.
And that's how they want it, because what happens when you fast for that period of time, you have these things called lipase enzyme. Their fat-storing enzymes become more sensitive, because the goal of the sumo wrestlers, they want to gain weight. Number two, they realized if they eat a lot of food, and not unhealthy food, but a lot at one time, they overproduce insulin. Insulin is the hunger hormone and a storage hormone. So now they're storing nutrients, and that's how they gain their weight. So just be careful that you're just doing the circadian rhythm fast overnight, 14 hours, ideal autophagy, you're cleaning the body, keeping these hormones where you want them to be.
So just give the listener, people hear about anabolic. Anabolic means growth, big, grow. And then catabolic means shrinking or decreasing. And so your anabolic are going to be those steroidal hormones.
And excessive insulin's anabolic.
Anabolic, your testosterone. Your
glucagon is catabolic.
And then cortisol is catabolic.
Catabolic.
Yeah, so we want that balance to be happening.
Yeah, people say, I just want to stimulate my cortisol so I can be catabolic. Well, no, you don't, because you're going to have a train wreck. That's a wrecking ball long term.
And then next thing you know, your thyroid. And I think we could
so now my thyroid's not working right.
Your thyroid is your stress gland. And so when the issue that we're having with men and women with thyroid is nutritionally is a big issue, but it's a stress gland. stress hormone.
Correct.
Well, it's trying to manage stress. And so when someone's thyroid isn't functioning, TSH, T3, T4.
Well, you were talking earlier about the pituitary and hypothalamus, and these are the big ones, right? I mean, pituitary is like a conductor.
There's great things to illustrate. You got hormones that are being produced in the brain. You got hormones that are produced in your thyroid. You talk about the pancreas,
the thymus gland. It goes on and on.
Adrenal glands, your cortisol. So you got glands, you got organs,
and the other thing too, we haven't really jumped into. Again, we'll talk about this maybe in a second here, but now you get into the stress, and you got your enteric nervous system is the lining of the gut.
Right. I have it right here on the sheet.
Okay, sorry, I jumped in.
No, that's fine. Your enteric nervous system is your gut.
So now you got hormones in the gut,
which are creating these nerve signals, which is serotonin. So imagine you have a stomach ache, or you're really bloated, or you have inflammation. It doesn't feel very good. That's signaling. And it's going to signal different things like take a nap. Well, it's not time to take a nap. Well, you have a gut health issue, wants you to
take
slow
a nap.
Down.
Right. Take a break.
Or you're overstressed, and it's like, okay, I stop digesting food.
I'm not hungry.
But I want to digest food. I just ate a big meal. So I'm going to go to the bathroom. So it's an orchestra that's so complex to me. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Let's end with two pieces. Number one, we're just hitting the stress, but how important is rest for your hormones?
It's number one.
Okay, that's pretty simple. What if we just got straight to what if we didn't have to spend?
People don't want to hear that though. You talked about this in one of our podcasts in the back. When I sit down with people and they have all this digestive issues, I go, well, let's talk about your stress. Well, why do we talk about that? Let's talk about your food. No, because if the stress is out of balance, we just talked about the enteric nervous system, digestive system. We talk about the bowels, the bowel, the urine, the lymph, the lungs, the skin. That's out of balance. So if that's out of balance, I can't really get you to where you want to be.
Well, let's take it two factors, and sometimes I don't think we connect the dots. Number one, if you were trying to get as ripped and big as possible, how important would rest be? Like you didn't have a job. That's your only job.
I always tell people you have to rest as hard as you train.
So rest would allow you to
repair,
lean, fit, muscular.
Yeah, because now your hormones are being.
Now let's talk about performance. If you were, the NBA Finals just finished up. If you were trying to perform at your best, and you had how much recovery? How important is recovery?
Well, and again, we look at we're talking about college football now, and we're talking about the NBA Finals, and Halliburton just tore his Achilles. They don't have the season way too long. There's not enough recovery. And so when you look at these games back to back to back to back, super high intense, amazing very athletes. Intense. Yep. Both women, men, rest is the thing. I mean, you talked about Usain Bolt, you talked about LeBron James. The really focus is how much sleep do they get.
And so we think about it from a performance, and we understand that we need to do it for recovery, and we think about these athletes, and we think about our brain, but we don't connect the dots to, well, my testosterone is low. Well, you're running 5,000 miles an hour. You're not eating lunch even sitting down if you ever eat lunch.
As soon as I see testosterone level under 400 for men,
it's a stress.
Under 20 for women.
You're not sleeping.
You're not sleeping.
Yeah.
I'll say it right away. You're not sleeping, are you? How'd you know that? Well, your testosterone level's low. Let's talk about that first before we talk about XYZ.
So then people get fixated on the Whoop and how much sleep they're getting. But we go both spectrums. We get the blood work and the testosterone or the hormones are out of whack, and we say, well, how are we going to solve it with supplementation?
Right.
Versus number one is rest, and that's why it's rest. And so that's stress.
But yeah, so I came at it. Well, yeah, it's because if you looked at stress, well, however you want to categorize it, the body's out of balance. You have fear. Your sympathetic nervous system's cranking all day long, the fight or flight. Those hormones are on, the other hormones are turned off.
Yeah, and I should have looked up the stats. I can't tell you how many thyroids are getting removed. I can't tell you how the increase of thyroid cancer is. I can tell you that TSH and T3 and T4 are being replaced and medicated.
But if you had somebody that had a thyroid problem or low T levels or whatever, you got to help them understand that. Now, the problem is they're going to have to change the lifestyle.
And it's going to take a little time.
It's going to take some time. You got to look at your schedule.
Time. I don't know if you picked the Darren Shank. We both love Darren Shank because he gives some insight. But, effort to results ratio, effort really high in the front end, results pretty low. And then as they become rituals and habits, results are cranking, effort low.
And I always talk about hormones. If you're getting enough sleep and all the stuff been talking about, but your body's not working with you, not against you. And that's really what you want.
Man, I'm eating lettuce and food, and I'm eating clean, and well, you're so stressed out probably about that, and then you're not sleeping, and we have life.
You know, great gut health. Your enteric nervous system's out of balance. Your neurotransmitters are not where you want them to be.
I haven't had time to exercise yet, so it is this equation. So let's hit.
But yeah, rest is number one.
Let's hit exercise. You talked about the lymphatic system. You talked about, moving your arms and moving the body. What's movement? Obviously, it's important, but what's it doing hormonally?
So movement for hormones, again, motion creates positive emotion. So it comes right back to the gut. I mean, if you start moving your body, your neurotransmitters get
endorphins. We hear that
everything starts to get
high.
Yeah. So again, if I'm having a bad day and I feel like, again, what's bad, but something's bothering me. As soon as I move my body starts to calm down. So now we're into the nervous system being more in balance. And then from there, like I said, just moving your arms, that's the lymphatic system, and clean the body, mini trampoline, do calisthenics. But strength training really is the fountain of youth for your building hormones. And that's why I tell, all our clients that are over 50, especially for everybody. But when you're over 50, it's not even really an option anymore. Strength training is the fountain of youth.
So hormonally, okay, you do cardio, you burn a ton of calories during cardio, which is fine. We want to get the heart vascular. Yeah. But when you strength train, you stimulate these hormones, and you'll actually start to burn more calories later.
Yeah, so you're going to put adaptation of these building hormones.
But it all comes back to the hormones.
Comes back to the hormones.
Your metabolism is
a
result of hormones.
So, in bodybuilding,
that's why when you start to strength train, you might actually be a little more hungry. You're burning calories, and
then you get into the mitochondria. The mitochondria is more active, more burning calories. So that's why muscle is really imperative as we age. It's not about weight; it's about muscle. We do not want to lose muscle as we age, and the way to build and maintain muscle is strength training and resting and our healthy fats.
And so, from a lymphatic system, this is why you love the mini trampoline. But you and Walt used to joke about the lymphatic system with the sleep. And so there's all these different ways that the body detoxifies. And as we kind of wrap this up, there's two sides of this equation that I started today is how do you supplement and how do you and why are we blocking? Well, we're going to come at it from a different approach. How do we build the building blocks, and how do we flush some of this gunk out the window? So the building blocks are going to be the nutritionally, the omega-3 fats, the selenium, the zinc, these real foods, resting, sleeping,
space,
strength training, space, moving your body. And then you have the gunk flush.
Yes.
This is going to be your greens. This is going to be moving your body. This is going to be
your water.
Get rid of the supplementation. And so a lot of people hormonally are trying to out-supplement whatever they think the aging process is going to do.
Right.
You're hearing about the peptides and the shots and the supplements and the collagen and all that stuff. In isolation, it's probably okay. But you start to add 5 things here and 4 things there, and you're not worried about sleep because you're going to hack it this way.
And the other thing you said at the very beginning, too, cholesterol is going to compromise your sex hormones. It's that simple because cholesterol makes your hormones. So that's why we're not a fan of statin meds, because you're going to compromise your hormones.
I mean, if you're on a statin medication, you're going to have a sex hormone issue.
There's no doubt. And then you take this for this and this for that and down the road. So
it's
again,
a great business model. Prescribe one thing leads to the next. Again, I'm not your doctor, and that's a joke, but that's what we're talking about today, hormones. And I think I just turned 38. I care about my hormones more than 30, but if you're listening and you're 25,
get them checked.
Get them checked, because now you can compare. And if you're 65 and you haven't paid attention to them at all, it's time to get going.
And if you're getting them checked and they're super low, start with the big stuff. Am I getting enough sleep? Then you move into what am I eating and how am I moving? And really I've seen major changes with, I had a gentleman I told you years ago, he raised his testosterone level 130 points in 9 months without any stuff, just building this foundation. So it's very possible to improve wherever you're at.
All right, as we wrap up, I think one of the biggest takeaways, and I already knew this, but I always learn and think about it a different way as you kind of see it. Kind of like what I said about Darren Shank's testimonial, effort up front. That's what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Is there some lower effort things, but results at the back end are going to be exponential.
Yeah,
high effort.
Let your body work with you, not against you.
Low LDL. So we're talking about cholesterol. Cholesterol is the backbone of all hormones. Low LDL equals hormonal disaster. And so I know we want to prevent heart risk and heart attacks and cardiovascular issues, and I know we're scared of those things, but trying to keep the LDL too low is going to cause hormonal disaster.
Well, and the other thing too, just one little caveat here is as people start taking some, back to the Dr. Jan Osich story, we were taking way too much progesterone, estrogen, which led to a lot of problems. Today, with testosterone replacement therapy, most people don't realize that you're going to increase the chances of stroke and heart disease because you increase red blood cells and platelet aggregation, and the list goes on and on. So we just have to wake up that there always will be something down the road that will get out of balance.
Versus going back to the source of some of these things that were designed.
And we always talk about too, if you could take that little pill, many people want to do that, but man, the fun part's the journey. That's the effort.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging with us in our new studio. We'll be back next time. I'll have to chase you down for the in person. But again, hormones today. So much to learn. It's a fascinating orchestra.
And if you got questions, reach out to us. We're happy to help you.
info@ontarrioliving.com, and we'll see you again next time.